Hello students, welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Welcome to a session on economy this week, wherein we'll be taking up some of the very important articles that have appeared in various business related newspapers and we'll be analyzing these particular articles. For this particular video, I've chosen the time period from 9th of December to 22nd December 2019 and the articles that I've chosen are from Business Line, Hindu, Business Standard, Indian Express and Live Mint. Let's begin the discussion. The first article is related to the concept of anti-profiteering. Please understand, under the ambit of a GST, that is Goods and Services Tax, Government of India basically reduced the tax rates on various goods and services over a period of time. Let's say hypothetically, before the introduction of a GST on certain good whose value was 100 rupee, let's say Government of India had a tax rate of 12%. So when this particular good is sold in the market, basically the market price will be 100 rupee plus a 12% of 100, that will be 12, which will become 112 rupees. And let's say hypothetically, Government of India brought this particular good under the ambit of a 5% GST. So with this particular new taxation rate, the market price should be 100 rupee plus 5% of 100 will be how much? 5 rupee GST, and the market price should come down to 105 rupees. So understand this, Government of India says with a reduction in the GST or with introduction of a GST, the tax imposition on these particular commodities, if it has been reduced, the seller or the manufacturer should transfer this particular benefit to the consumer in the market. I'll repeat the statement. With the change in the GST rate, if the manufacturer or the seller is paying lesser tax to the government, then this particular benefit of a GST rate reduction should be transferred to the consumers in the market. Now, what manufacturers or sellers might do, I'll take the same example. Imagine the same concept. Earlier the market price was 112. Now the GST rate has been reduced from 12% to 5%. The seller could simply decrease the price from 112 rupees to let's say 108 rupee and say that, see, with reduction in the GST, I've reduced by market prices. But what Government of India says is, yes, you have reduced the market price, but you are not transferring the full benefit of a rate reduction to the consumer in the market. And whenever such unfair practices are used by the companies to increase their profits, I'll repeat the statement, whenever such unfair practices are used by the companies to increase their profits, this particular process is called as profiteering. Now, Government of India, to counter this particular concept of a profiteering practices of the businesses, has introduced the concept of National Anti-Profiteering Authority under the ambit of GST. Government amended the CGST Act. As per this particular amended provision, the government has set up an authority, National Anti-Profiteering Authority. And the duty of this particular authority is to find out if any of the businesses or sellers or manufacturers, if they are not transferring the commensurate benefit or the full benefit of rate reduction to the consumers, then this authority will penalize these particular businesses or sellers in the market. In the recent times, a large number of companies have come under the ambit of the National Anti-Profiteering Authority, and this authority has imposed penalties on these particular companies. One such company which has been mentioned here is Nestle. Another very important company, FMCG company, which came under fire from this particular authority was Hindustan Unilever Limited, on which more than 300 crore worth of fines were imposed by this particular authority. Now that is a basic crux of the article which is given here. Now let me go beyond what is given in the article. First point, the National Anti-Profiteering Authority, though has been set up by Government of India, various experts have raised a concern over the functioning of this particular authority. Now, what is the concern raised by the experts here? They are basically saying that Government of India, in its document of anti-profiteering, basically says that the manufacturer will have to transfer the commensurate reduction in the tax rate. Follow the argument here? Government of India basically says the manufacturer will have to transfer the commensurate rate reduction. Now the question is, who will define the term commensurate rate reduction? The benefit or the commensurate benefit will be defined by whom? For a manufacturer, the commensurate reduction could be something else. For the authority, the rate reduction could be something else. For example, usually the manufacturers say that we will not be able to reduce the market prices Rather, we will increase the weightage or grammage or the package of these particular products or the commodities that we are selling in the market. But usually these kind of practices will not be accepted by the anti-profiteering authority. So the problem in case of imposing anti-profiteering measures is we do not have a very good framework to define what is commensurate. Let me give an example. Australia was one of the very few countries which introduced a very good framework for countering the concept of a profiteering by the businesses. What they introduced in case of Australia is basically referred as net dollar margin rule, NDMR. What happens under net dollar margin rule? Government of Australia basically says that if the tax that you are paying to the government, that is indirect tax that you are paying to the government, comes down by $1, then your market price should also come down by $1. I'll repeat the statement. As per net dollar margin rule, if a business is paying $1 indirect tax lesser to the government, then its market price should be reduced by $1. This particular principle is called as a net dollar margin rule. Government of India has not clearly defined the concept of anti-profiteering in this particular provisions as such. This has been raised as a concern by various experts because if it is not clearly defined, the companies might think commensurate is this, the authority might think commensurate will be this. And when the authority will issue an order or slap a penalty on these particular companies, it will lead to litigation in the system. And the whole idea of reducing litigation with the GST will become counterproductive. That is the reason the experts are saying that with these kind of vague definitions or with these kind of clauses, it could actually lead to tax terrorism in the system. So this is the basic discussion which has been provided. Now apart from this, another very important point you must remember is with respect to National Anti-Profiteering Authority, it was set up in the year 2017 with a sunset clause of 2 years. This is there in the newspaper, please remember this. What do you mean by sunset clause of 2 years? I am saying it was set up in 2017. So when it was set up, Government of India itself said the authority will function for the next 2 years. That in simple terms is called as a sunset clause, which means after 2 years the authority will cease to function or cease to operate. And very recently the GST Council has given an extension of 2 more years for the functioning of this particular authority, which in simple terms means rather than shutting shop in the year 2019, the authority will continue to operate till 2021, which again has raised certain concerns in the market. So basically these are the points related to the idea of a National Anti-Profiteering Authority as well as the concept of anti-profiteering. Now based on this, let's solve a question here. Consider the following statements. National Anti-Profiteering Authority has been set up under IT Act of 1961. Wrong. It is set up under CGST. Second, the tenure of NAA has been extended till 2020. Again wrong. It is till 2021. So both the statements are wrong. Right option will be option D. Both are false. The next article is related to the dispute settlement under the ambit of WTO. Now please understand, in case of a World Trade Organization, whenever there is a dispute or a trade dispute amongst the member countries, right now there is a particular process which has to be followed to resolve these particular disputes. The basic process which will be followed is, let's imagine country X is unhappy with the trade policy of or the guidelines of country Y. It has a certain dispute against the policies of country Y. It will take this particular dispute to WTO, World Trade Organization. And under the ambit of a WTO, usually the first step will be they will try to resolve this particular trade dispute by holding consultations. That is basically WTO, under which there is a general council will ask both the parties to hold negotiations or consultations and resolve this particular dispute amicably. Now if the parties are unhappy with the consultations, they want the WTO itself to resolve this particular dispute, then the next step will be the general council will set up a dispute settlement body. That is basically the general council will act as a dispute settlement body and they are going to set up a panel. And this particular panel is going to investigate the claims or the complaints of these particular countries and it is going to submit a report. And understand this, if one of the parties is unhappy with the report, they can counter or they can appeal against the order or the report submitted by the panel, and this particular appeal will be taken up at appellate body. This is the crux of the discussion now. In case of the appellate body, WTO has a sanctioned strength of 7 judges. That is, a maximum 7 judges can be appointed. And whenever an appeal has to be taken up by the appellate body, you need a strength of 3 judges. And these particular 7 judges are appointed for a tenure of 4 years. And remember this, whenever any decision has to be taken under the ambit of a WTO, it has to be done through consensus. The whole idea of a WTO is through consensus. Every member country must accept the decision. Only then WTO can accept this or implement this as a decision. If one member country holds out or vetoes something, then WTO cannot decide anything. Now follow this very carefully. The number of judges, which is supposed to be 7 under the ambit of appellate body, it has kept on declining. Why? The judges' tenure of 4 years is over. They are supposed to be appointed or reappointed. One very important country or a member country, that is USA, has vetoed the appointment of judges. As a result of this, rather than having a sanction strength of 7, it has kept on declining. And in the month of December, finally only 1 judge has been left out under the ambit of appellate body. And when you have only 1 judge, this particular number of a judge is not sufficient to take up the cases under the appellate body. As a result of this appellate body has become defunct now. And this is very important point for a simple reason. Appellate body was considered to be the Supreme Court or the most important body under the ambit of a WTO. And this has functioned in the last 2 decades and resolved many of the disputes or has addressed many of the trade disputes, irrespective whether the countries are big countries, important countries, leading countries or global trade partners. Doesn't matter. It has taken up these particular cases and has resolved these particular disputes. And by making this particular appellate body useless or defunct, it has basically thrown open these particular trade disputes. And now question is, who is going to look after the implementation of these particular trade agreements? For example, if there are 2 countries A and B, one country is very strong, it has got very high amount of a trade, it has got a leverage over the other country. Now, don't you think this particular country or the first country may misuse this particular position and try to influence the trade policies of the second country? And since the second country doesn't have any other avenue to take care of these particular disputes, it will be forced to come under these particular pressures. There have been various concerns on the same lines which have been raised by various experts with this particular appellate body becoming defunct. But having said so, in the recent times, some of the member countries are making their own arrangements to ensure these kind of disputes will be resolved. For example, European Union has basically stated that it will make its own arrangement meanwhile to take or to address these particular issues of trade disputes. Again, what kind of arrangement it will be made, we will have to wait and see. It is just a proposal now. Apart from European Union, there are many other countries which have come together and they are making their own arrangements. Now, this is the crux of the article given here. Based on this particular discussion, I have given a question here. Consider the following statements about WTO. Appellate body has a sanction strength of 7 judges. True. General Council is the highest level decision making body. Correct. General Council of WTO meets as a dispute settlement body. Correct. All the 3 are correct. Option D is the right option. The next article is related to power tariffs. The supply chain in the power sector will be, first, there will be generation companies. Then this particular electricity will be transmitted by transmission companies and finally distributed to the consumers by distribution companies, which are famously referred as DISCOMs. The problem in the power sector is, 1, follow this, the distribution companies will purchase electricity from the generation companies and sell it to the consumers and collect the tariffs. The basic terminology that they are using are 1, ACS and ARR. What is ACS? ACS stands for average cost of supply and ARR stands for average revenue realized. The DISCOM will incur a cost or an expenditure when they purchase and sell the electricity to the consumer in the market. This is referred as average cost of supply. And for having supplied electricity, it will impose and collect the tariffs, which is basically referred as average revenue realized. In case of India's power sector, the ACS is higher than ARR. I'll repeat the statement. In case of India's power sector, ACS is higher than ARR. It means if I am a DISCOM, I am purchasing electricity and supplying it to you. And the cost that I have incurred in doing all of this is higher than the money or the tariff that I am going to collect from you. As a result of this, can I simply say that DISCOMs are incurring huge amount of losses? Yes, that has been one issue. And second very important issue in case of the power sector has been the issue of cross subsidies. Now what is this idea of a cross subsidy? Let's say hypothetically here is a DISCOM EX. It is supplying electricity for a household. It is also supplying electricity for a commercial entity. Now whenever they supply the electricity to two different consumers like this, the DISCOM will charge a higher tariff on the electricity that they supply to a commercial enterprise, and when they supply the electricity to a household, they will charge a lesser tariff. Let's say hypothetically, average cost of supply for X is 4 rupee per kilowatt hour, and when they supply the same unit to a household, they will charge let's say 3 rupee per kilowatt hour, and when they supply the same unit to a commercial enterprise, they will charge let's say at 4.8 rupee per kilowatt hour. The logic is, for household, they are going to subsidize the electricity, and for commercial entities, they are going to overcharge or impose higher tariffs for consumption of same unit of electricity. So that whatever is the excess money collected here by imposing higher tariffs on the commercial entities, some of this could be used to bridge the subsidy which is given for the households. This basic practice is called as cross subsidization. And in case of India, we follow concept of a cross subsidization in power sector. We also follow cross subsidization in case of railway sector also. That is the second issue in case of the power sector. The third issue with the power sector is that there is a concept of AT&C losses, aggregate technical and commercial losses. Now what do you mean by aggregate technical and commercial losses? Electricity, whenever it is supplied or transmitted from point A to point B or distributed from point A to point B, some of the electricity will be lost because of the quality of raw material. And when you supply electricity, there could be power theft also. And when you supply electricity to let's say irrigation purposes, the electricity supplied is free of a cost. There is no metering concept there. So as a result of this, the DISCOMs will incur huge amount of a cost which is called as AT&C, aggregate technical and commercial losses. Now, before the introduction of a scheme called as UDAY, Ujjwal DISCOM Assurance Yojana, which was implemented by Government of India in order to address the issues in the DISCOM sector or the financial stress in the DISCOM sector, the AT&C losses in case of India was more than 25%. So with introduction of Ujjwal DISCOM Assurance Yojana, Government of India basically said, one, you will have to bridge the difference between ACS and ARR. That is basically how much is the difference, that is ACS being higher than ARR. You will have to bridge this particular difference and bring the difference to zero. And second very important target which was set up under Ujjwal DISCOM Assurance Yojana is to reduce aggregated technical and commercial losses from whatever the existing number was there to 15%. And the target date that was given for these particular DISCOMs was April 2020. And we are in the year 2020, and this particular article has basically evaluated the implementation of Ujjwal DISCOM Assurance Yojana. And the article says that the results are not good. Results are not rosy. Why? One, the aggregate technical and commercial losses, which was supposed to be dragged down to 15%, are hovering at around 22%. Which is much higher than what was actually targeted. And second, the difference between ACS and ARR even today is existing. Different states have different tariff differences, but overall it says that the difference between ACS and ARR today it is around 40 paisa. It simply means I am spending 40 paisa more as a DISCOM when I purchase and supply electricity to a consumer in the market. As a result of this, the DISCOMs have not been able to come out of the financial losses. Even today, many of the DISCOMs which are owned by the state governments are incurring losses. And added to that, this particular article also focuses on the idea of providing subsidies in the form of free electricity units to the households. Now, the example that has been taken in this particular article is the state government of Delhi. The state government of New Delhi very recently announced that initial some of the number of units of electricity which is supplied to the households will be free of cost, will be subsidized by the government. The argument which has been put forward in this particular article is, what is the logic of providing subsidized electricity for all the households in a place such as Delhi, where the per capita incomes are very, very high? Better argument would have been that, or better implementation would have been that, they should have identified the households below certain income levels and should have targeted these particular households so that these particular households which actually need the benefit would have been given the benefit of subsidized electricity. So these are some of the issues which have been raised in this particular article. And what are the recommendations? What is the way forward? The article states that 1. The tariff revision has to be done by the states. That is, upward tariff revision has to be done so that the difference between ACS and ARR will be bridged. Second, the government has to look into reducing AT&C losses, aggregate technical and commercial losses. And third, very important recommendation is, rather than giving subsidy for all the households in the form of free electricity, we should implement a concept of a direct benefit transfer, wherein identified households will be given a benefit or a subsidy so that the consumption of electricity will be subsidized only for these particular identified beneficiaries rather than for all the households. So these are the points which have been mentioned in this particular article. Based on this, I've taken up a question. Consider the following statements about Ujjwal Discom Assurance Yojana. The Discoms are to bring down the difference between ACS and ARR to 0. Yes, that is the target under this. AT&C losses are to be brought down to 10%. No, the target was 15%. So only the first statement is correct. Option A is correct. I've also given a descriptive question. Discuss the issues plaguing the power sector. I've already discussed some of the issues, right? One is the difference between ACS and ARR. That is a very big issue. Second issue is cross subsidization. Third issue is the concept of aggregate technical and commercial losses. Fourth issue is related to fuel adequacy. For example, the most important fuel in case of India for generation of electricity is what? Coal. But there's a problem with the coal availability in the domestic market itself. As a result of this, we are heavily dependent on the import of coal from the rest of the world. Apart from this, within the fuel adequacy, we are also heavily dependent on the nuclear material or nuclear plant also. What about the renewable energy sources? We are very much dependent on the imports of, let's say, equipment such as solar photovoltaic modules. So that is another issue. Apart from fuel adequacy, there is also the issue of standard assets in the thermal power plants. So these are some of the issues which are plaguing the power sector, and you are supposed to write about 250 words on all these particular issues in the power sector. The next article is related to MSME Sampark. Government of India in the year 2018 launched a platform by the name MSME Sampark. The objective of this particular platform or website was to ensure that a common platform will be available for job seekers as well as job providers to meet and hiring could take place. For example, if I'm a vocationally trained person and I'm searching for a job, I could simply get myself registered in this particular MSME Sampark website, and various companies or job providers or employers will seek to provide me with an employment opportunity using this particular website itself. The logic was to ensure that there is a meeting place for both the job seekers as well as the employers. This particular article discusses the performance of this particular portal as such. And this article mentions that since the launch of this particular portal or website in the year 2018, around 5,385 recruiting companies have registered, and as of now 923 vacancies only are available or listed in this particular platform, but the number of registered aspirants or job seekers are more than 4.6 lakh. And since the launch of this particular portal, only around 2,500 plus candidates have been placed in various companies. So the ministry has basically taken up this particular issue and is investigating what is the issue and why this particular platform or portal is not performing very well. Because the objective was to ensure that more and more the trained aspirants will get registered in this particular portal and they will be easily absorbed by the market. But having said so, since the launch, it has been seen that on monthly basis, only around 150 plus people are getting placed in the market as such. So the MSME ministry has stated that it will look into the issues which are plaguing this particular portal. But having said so, the same article also mentions that the issue with the performance in this particular portal has been that the employers are basically unhappy with the skilling level of these particular trainees. And since the skilling level of these particular trainees is not satisfactory, they are not opting to hire these particular employees. That has been the point which has been mentioned in this particular article. Now, based on this, I've given a question here. Which of the following measures have been taken by the government to improve the credit availability for the MSMEs? 1. Pradhan Mantri Mudra Yojana. Yes, it is true. TREDS, Trade Receivables E-Discounting System. Yes, it is also true. ENAM, no, this is more applicable to agriculture sector. So the right option will be option B, 1 and 2. The next article is related to GST Council. Some of the very important points are: 1. It is a constitutional body which has been set up by President of India. Second, it represents a cooperative federalism between center as well as the states. Third, it will have representation from center, states as well as those union territories where there is a legislative assembly. Fourth, very important point, the GST Council is supposed to make decisions related to GST. What kind of decisions? For example, what kind of goods and services should be brought under the ambit of GST? What kind of goods and services must be left out of the ambit of GST? If they are brought under the ambit of GST, under which slab they are supposed to be kept? If there is a dispute between center and state, how this dispute has to be resolved? So in simple terms, anything to do with the GST shall be taken up by the GST Council itself, and the decision of the GST Council will decide what will be the structure of GST in case of India. Now, whenever the decision process has to be made under the ambit of a GST Council, either their decision can be taken through consensus or there is a concept of a voting. What do you mean by consensus? If all the participants in the GST Council want to take a particular decision only, or all of them are on a single side, there is no question of a voting if all the members are agreeing to it. This is basically a concept of a consensus. What if some of the states are unhappy, they want to vote against it, some of the states are happy, they want to vote in favor of it. In this particular concept, the idea of a voting will come into picture. And so far, understand this, so far until very recently conducted GST Council, all the decisions of the GST Council were taken through consensus. For the first time in the recently concluded GST Council meet, there was a voting. Now, what is the idea for voting in the GST Council? Out of the total votes which are given to GST Council, 1/3 of the votes will be given to the center, or the weightage of vote for the center will be 1/3, and remaining 2/3 of the votes will be distributed amongst the states as well as the union territories. And remember this, irrespective of size of the state, importance of the state, equal voting weight will be given for all the other participants. But more importantly, whenever the GST Council has to take a decision, you need a majority of at least 75%. This was taken up and raised as a concern by various other experts. For a simple reason, if center controls 1/3 of the voting weightage, and all the other states put together can contribute or can accumulate only 67% of the voting weightage, it essentially means center will have the veto power. That has been one concern which has been raised against this particular idea of a voting distribution between center and state. But more importantly, what is given in this particular article is that for the first time under the GST Council, the GST Council has gone for voting. And this particular voting was done in order to decide the GST rates on lotteries. Earlier, in case of lotteries, there was a dual structure of a GST. For example, in case of the state-run lotteries, the GST rate that was applicable was 12%, and in case of the state authorized or private lotteries, the GST rate applicable was 28%. And in the recently concluded GST Council, this particular matter was taken up and it was put for voting. The first voting was taken up in order to decide whether to increase the GST rate on lotteries or not. And when this particular vote was done, they again took up whether the increased GST rate should be 18% or 28%. As a result of this particular voting process, now irrespective of whether the lottery is a state run or a private run lottery, the GST rate uniformly applicable will be 28%. So this is the crux of the discussion given in this particular article. Now based on this, let's solve the question. Consider the following statements about GST Council. It is a constitutional body, true. The voting powers are distributed equally amongst all the participants, that is center and state, wrong. Quorum requirement is 1/4 of the total number of members, wrong. What do you mean by quorum? What is the minimum number of members must be present so as to start the discussions in the GST Council? And the quorum requirement in case of the GST Council is 50%. So the right option will be option A.